Alrighty, how's it going everybody? Today I want to bring you another video. Today I'm going to be starting my two-part video series on valuing financial and operating leases. Leases are a really interesting topic. They're really applicable to real life. I know a lot of you are probably students living in some sort of on-campus living arrangement, whether it be an apartment or some sort of dormitory. You certainly have a lease that you are obligated to pay your rent, and that's how a lot of these institutions structure um, their agreements with students that attend the university and just need to live on campus for a certain amount of time per year. So, with that being said, in this video, I'm going to be covering operating leases, and operating leases are really kind of interesting because there is a sort of inherent advantage in them as far as from the the lessor's perspective. Operating leases are very sought after because you don't have to typically include them on your balance sheet, which is something that corporations actually prefer. So in this case, we're going to be covering a operating lease from the lessor's perspective. So the lessor is the owner of the lease agreement. They're the person who's going to be collecting monthly or yearly lease payments from the lessee. So we're calculating from the owner's perspective. That's one thing to keep in mind. Um, and we're going to be calculating the net present value of this lease agreement to the owner. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing we do is, as you can see, I've got it set up on this sort of statement here. We have the initial cost, which is $75 million. And what the lease here is for a white stretch limo. So the lessor is going to pay $75 million in year zero to acquire this limousine. And with that $75 million, we have determined that the maintenance, insurance, selling, and administration costs, also known as the total costs of the firm or operating costs, are going to be $12 million per year. And that's going to be every single year. That's going to be a linear number. It's not going to be changing like we're going to see with some of the other numbers, including depreciation tax shields. So for the total costs, the variable costs, the operating costs, call them anything you want. Just know that they're going to be fixed. It's going to be $12 million per year. So with that number being given to us, we can actually calculate this here, which is the tax shield on the costs. So kind of the good thing about these costs to the lesser is you don't have to pay taxes on them, or there's a certain amount of tax deferrability with these costs. So, and in order to calculate the tax shield on these specific, I call them the M/A, just call them operating costs. You actually just take, as you can see right here, you just take the total cost and you multiply it by the tax bracket that the corporation is in. And in this case, we're in the 35% tax bracket. So we just take that $12 million and we multiply it by 35%, and it's going to give us $4.2 million a year. And that is our interest tax shield on our total costs. So that's going to be the amount that we save in not paying taxes. So moving on to the next part, and again, as the total costs are, that's going to be fixed over the course of the entire life of the project each year. Um, so now we're going to get into calculating the depreciation tax shield, and this is what I told you earlier, where it's going to get a little bit confusing, and it might be a little bit tricky for you guys to wrap your head around this. But I'm going to really try to show you the math that I'm doing and display it in a really visually appealing way, in my opinion, so you can kind of understand what I'm doing here. So we're going to be using MACRS, M-A-C-R-S, as you see right here, the depreciation method. It's just a kind of alternative depreciation method. I know a lot of you guys have probably heard of straight line depreciation, which is where you depreciate an asset at the same percent, a linear percent each year. It's not going to be changing based on the year that you're depreciating the asset. This is just an alternative to that. And with MACRS, we're actually going to be using different percentages of depreciation amounts on that asset each year. So as you can see, in the first year, it's 20%. We depreciate the asset by 20%. In the second year, we depreciate by 32%. Third year, 19.2%. In the fourth and fifth year, it's the same amount of depreciation on the asset, which is 11.52%. And then in the final year, sixth year, we have 5.76% depreciation on the asset. And in order to calculate this out, it's a lot simpler than it seems. You just take the total amount of the asset, which is the $75 million stretch limo, and you multiply it by that percent. So in year one, we depreciate by 20%. 20% times 75 million is 15 million. And then you just multiply this number by the tax bracket that the investor is in. So we're in the 35% tax bracket, as I said before. So you multiply $15 million by 35%, and you get $5.25 million. That is our depreciation tax shield for the first year. And you'll see that number right here. And one thing you've probably noticed is we don't have a depreciation tax shield for year zero. You don't depreciate the asset in the first year, or in the year that you buy it, essentially. So moving on to the second year, as you can see here, it's the same concept. You take the $75 million, multiply by the percent of depreciation, 32%, gives you 24 million, multiplied by the tax bracket, 35%, gives you a depreciation tax shield, in this case of $8.4 million. And that is exactly what the number that we have here. Go ahead and continue those calculations. For the third year, you get 75 million times 19.2% will give you 14.4 million. Multiply that by the 35% tax bracket, it will give you $5.04 million. And then for year 4 and 5, it's going to be the same amount of depreciation tax shield, because it's the same percentage of the asset being depreciated, with 11.52%. Gives you 8.64 million. You multiply that by 35%, gives you 3.02 million for year 4 and year 5. And then in year 6, we take the 75 million multiplied by 5.76%, gives you 4.32 million, and then you multiply that by 35%, gives you $1.51 million for the 6-year depreciation tax shield. So, wow, I need to take a breath. It's really simple now. We have all the things we need to calculate the NPV of the lease agreement to the lessor. And as you can see here, what is displayed in this statement is I've actually kind of rewrote this over here in a kind of linear format, so you can kind of see how these numbers are being added up to equate to these. So if you look down each column, negative 75 minus 12 plus 4.2 is going to be equal to this. You just add the columns down, and these are going to give you our numbers before we discount it to the present. You take those numbers, as you can see here, and you divide them by 1 plus the interest rate to the exponent of year. So year 0, obviously, we don't divide by 1 plus the interest rate, because 1.07 to the 0 power is 1, so you just wouldn't do anything to that. And as you can see in year 1, we're discounting by 1.07 to the first, to the second, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth. You're just taking the numbers from here. So we're taking the numbers we just calculated by adding these columns up, and you add them all together with the discounted back to the present, and you get negative $98.15 million for the NPV. Wow. Now, this is a really critical number, because we can use this present value of the lease agreement to actually calculate what are we going to charge these people for this lease. What do we need to charge them in order to break even and not lose money? And the way that we do that is we use something called a present value annuity factor. And the present value annuity factor is basically just a way to represent a continuous payment over a period of time. The only kind of difference in the present value annuity, the classic present value annuity or ordinary annuity, is that we don't expect payment in the first year. However, in this case, we are expecting payment in the first year. So we're just going to have to make a slight modification to it. But I'm going to show you on the next slide how we actually do that. So let me go ahead and open up this one. This is my second page of notes. So I'll show you where you find this. So you can go on to Google, look up PVA, annuity factor 7-year, and find it pretty easily. Hold on here. So this is it right here. I've highlighted it. If you scroll over, we have 7 years here on the period, 7% for our discount rate. And we can see that our present value annuity factor is 5.3893. We'll round just to the third digit there. So 5.389. And you can see it right here. So normally that's what we would use if we were doing this, but we're expecting payment in the first year, so we have to make that slight modification. All we have to do is add in 1 year of payment. So we just multiply it by 1 plus the interest rate, which is 7%. So negative, or not negative, this is just a dash. 5.389 times 1.07 is going to give us 5.766. So that is our adjusted PVA for this. So now, in order to calculate the break-even lease payment before tax, all we do is you take our total NPV of the project, which is 98.15 million. I know it's negative. I have a positive number here. It doesn't matter if you do negative or positive. It's just to kind of clarify it for you. And you take that number and you divide by this PV, present value annuity factor, of 5.766, and that will give you $17.02. So that's the before tax break-even lease payment. That is what you would have to charge these people for the lease agreement in order to break even, not make any money, but not certainly lose any money. And that's before you account for tax that you're going to pay. So in order to account for the tax, you just take the $17.02 and you divide it by 1 minus the tax bracket, which is 35%. So you just divide by 65%, and you'll get $26.18, and that's your after-tax break-even rent lease payment here. And you can calculate the tax that you actually pay just by calculating the difference between these two numbers. 26.18 minus 17.02 is going to give you $9.16 for the tax. So I just showed you guys how to value a operating lease from the lessor's perspective. It's really kind of interesting. I know the concepts are a little bit confusing. We covered a lot of different things regarding the present value annuity interest factors. We also covered depreciation schedules using MAC-RS and a number of other concepts. So leave a comment if you have any further questions or you want me to clarify. In the next video, I'm going to be covering the financial lease, which is the other side of the spectrum, and it's very interesting as well. So I hope you guys tune into that video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.